everyone. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Hinson.
I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And we are back with our final installment for now of our things we think you should watch on streaming services. We still haven't come up with a better title.
we're taking nominations. You just keep us posted, guys.
Theoretically, for the rest of the year, we will have dedicated content for some of the TV shows we've been covering, namely Handmaid's Tale, Big Little Lies, and The Crown, if and when the third season drops later this year. So for our final thing we think you should watch on streaming. For now, because we said that earlier, we are talking about a movie on Netflix, a full-length feature movie called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And it came out last year. It was written and directed by Chiwetel Ejiofor of fame from 12 Years a Slave and The Martian. He's a delightful actor. I enjoy him very much. And it is the story of a drought and famine that took place in Malawi. It's set in Malawi in 2001. And tells the story of a young boy's attempts to save his village and his family from famine by teaching himself how to build a windmill so that he could harness electricity, so that they could pump water and farm outside of the raining season or in between the raining season in Malawi. So it's about 2 hours long. Tells the story. Spoiler alert, he builds the windmill, saves the village. But that's kind of the chunk of the film, dealing with new technologies and in a world in Africa where there was still extreme poverty in Malawi. And Dr. Donnelly will talk a lot more about that because she knows a lot more about it. And kind of this pushing back against tradition and how we do things and parental roles and all of these kinds of themes. So it was a delightful film. Dr. Donnelly and I both enjoyed it very much. 2 thumbs up. We don't have a lot to say more about that, but Dr. Donnelly is going to give a bit more background into Malawi and our connection with Malawi and her connection with Malawi as well.
Yeah, so you may have read the book, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, or you may have seen it out and about. There was a couple cities in the United States that chose it as their like one book, one city when it came out. Mm-hmm. So if the title sounds familiar, that might be why. It's about William Kakwemba, and who is played by an actor I have never seen before, but is a very charming child actor. And then Chiwetel Ejiofor plays his father. And
he's the wee actor is native Malawian as well.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
Yeah. I saw Chiwetel was on Graham Norton talking about it.
Amazing. My couple favorite, like just tiny things, and I'll explain why I love Malawi in a couple minutes, but most of the script is in Chichewa, which is their native language. Chichewa and English are the 2 official languages of Malawi, and it's very, as you're traveling through the country, it's very common to hear those used interchangeably in the same sentence, even.
And Chiwetel learned Chichewa because he wanted it to be authentic. And he was like, he said, for me to make the film, I had to learn that language because that was going to be the most authentic. If the language was all in English, it wouldn't have been authentic. So.
Yeah. And it is a tonal language because I've tried. It is not an easy thing to learn. So as he started speaking, I was like, holy crap, that's really Chichewa. Like, oh my gosh. Okay.
And I forget where his family is from in Africa, but it's not Malawi.
It is not Malawi. No, he is not Bantu. No.
I used to know, but I don't remember.
I feel like it's somewhere west because I used to know too, but I feel like he's west.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress.
So anyway, so Malawi, for folks who don't know, is a landlocked country in the southeastern corner of Africa. Its southern border touches South Africa. It is skinny. And it is poor. It's got 18 million people. It is one of the world's poorest countries, top to bottom, no questions asked. Irrigation is terrible. Their main industry is agriculture, but like almost nothing grows because the irrigation is so terrible and the sand is the soil is very dusty. There's a scene in the beginning where like they're all just like riding around covered with dust, and I started laughing because I was like, that is exactly what Malawi felt like to me. I was just covered top to bottom in dust for 2 weeks.
All the time.
So I am on the board of directors of an incredible organization called Urban Promise International. And I've been active with them for, in some shape or form, Urban Promise for about 25 years. And Urban Promise is as a whole, as well as international, is a nonprofit that believes that if you invest in a child, you change a village and you change the world. So we believe in education for all children, regardless of income status, gender identity, sexuality, faith, anything. And we provide safe places for education around the world. Urban Promise International has a program as well where we bring college graduates over from various sub-Saharan African countries, largely Malawi. That's our first and foremost. They come to America for anywhere from 18 months to 2 years, and they learn this model that we've been doing in America and Canada for a really long time. And then they, as the board, we help them with things like fundraising and business planning and things like that. And they go back to Malawi and they start them. So now we went from, one after school program 15 years ago to now we run, I think, 3 high schools in Malawi. We have an agriculture program. We have a bike repair program. We have like all this kind of stuff. Seeds of Promise is our new farm. And I had the privilege of traveling to Malawi in the summer of 2009. At the time, I was the intern, and my father was the president of the board of directors, so he and I went together. And we spent 2 weeks in Malawi, both in the capital of Lilongwe and then in other villages up and kind of down it, Medici and Blantyre and a couple other places where our other programs were. And I learned a whole lot about the fact that my life is unmitigatingly different and always will be. Mm-hmm. I've never, ever calculated, should I do anything that involves water today because it's going to be a 4-hour round trip walk to the well. I've never thought about the fact that if I don't show up for the feeding program at school, the 750 children that are coming won't eat again until the next week.
Yeah.
Their main staples are spinach and tomatoes and a maize-like crop. And just about every country in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know North Africa, by the way, very well. I don't know the more, I don't know the North African countries very well. So all of my work, that's why I keep saying sub-Saharan, but everywhere I've been has some sort of staple crop that is like maize or corn mixed with water till it makes a paste. Mm-hmm. It's called ugali. It's called a whole bunch of different things. And sima is what they call it in Malawi. And it is like, it becomes it's like bricks were dried out just a little bit and turned gummy.
Yeah.
And they don't really have flavor, but it's very filling. And you use it as a utensil as well to eat the rest of your food. So I ate that for 2 weeks. And I'm terrible with tomatoes, so I taught myself to eat tomatoes. But at the same time, like, I mean, it's rolling brownouts all the time. Like, they don't always have electricity. The infrastructure in Malawi is terrible. At this moment right now, they haven't really had a functional government in a couple years. It's on Human Rights Watch. There's a lot of problems. But so we're going to put some links to Urban Promise and some other places in the bottom. If after you watch this movie, you want to learn more about Malawi. They call themselves the warm heart of Africa. And I think when you watch this movie, you can kind of see why.
Oh, that's nice. I didn't know that.
They are, the culture of Malawi is one of ultimate hospitality, and curiosity and community. Life is very challenging there. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not, and there's a lot of crime. Like, my purse got stolen when we were there. And so I had to file a police report in a Malawi police station. There's lots of sexual assault. There is lots of issues. I mean, tons and tons of people have AIDS. Lots of children are born with AIDS. The life expectancy is somewhere around 30 for most of rural Malawi. Lots and lots and lots of issues, but in the middle of it is still beautiful life happening. And there's people like William Kakwamba, who should have gone to school and wanted to stay in school, but was prevented from doing so because he couldn't afford the fees.
Yeah.
And so that's the number one reason that people around the world, by the way, if you don't know, the number one reason that people don't attend school in developing nations is they can't afford it. Mm-hmm. And the number two reason is if they're a girl and they get their period.
Yeah.
So that's it. So the school fees, by the way, that William would have paid are the equivalent of about $10 a month. And they're a little higher now, but that school that he was going to, if he had $10 US a month, he would have been able to go to school. and that was not a fee that his father could afford. So this isn't, what I really love about this movie is that there's nothing shaming in it. It isn't this like voyeuristic tourist of like, look how pitiful Malawians are.
Yeah.
Which when we first heard that this was being filmed, a couple people that I work with at the nonprofit were a little nervous of kind of like what it would be. And then we heard an African immigrant son was going to be making it, and everybody felt a little bit better.
Yeah, because it could have really, really easily been poverty porn and
yep.
Poverty shaming and all
yep.
sorts of things that would have really done a disservice to the story. And I think that's what fundamentally, like it's a great story.
Yep.
And you can tell that while being realistic and authentic to what life was like and is like in Malawi, without shaming people, without making it voyeuristic. And it's a fine line to walk. But I think the fact that it was done by an African immigrant son, he was able to have that lens.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been done by a person who didn't have a level of association with those types of stories, I think we would have had a different and much worse movie.
Oh, for sure.
There's no way I could tell that story.
It's not my story to tell.
No.
Like when I do fundraising for Urban Promise, I'm really clear that like my role in this is as American white lady who believes really strongly in the education of children, and that the world only changes through education and poverty alleviation.
Yeah.
And so that's, in a way, so like, let's get to work. People need water. We can figure out how to provide that. Yeah. People need food. Let's work on that. And let's do those basic baby steps. And in the same way, just very, very honestly, not in a poverty porn kind of way, but it does remind us that if you are born in the United States, you have won the lottery in a very real way in terms of access to resources.
For a lot of people, yeah.
For the majority of the population. And that is something that is important to remember. In most developed nations, there are availability of resources. Your access may be changing, but the resources are there. And there's so many countries around the world where the resources just aren't even there.
Yeah.
And how do we talk about global equity when we talk about national equity as well? I'm usually the person in the conversation when we're talking about American poverty that's like, okay, but also.
Poverty looks different everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
The other really thing I loved about this movie, religion scholar hat, is that in Malawi, there is a lot of religious diversity. And there's a lot of Islam and Christianity have both been kind of adopted in certain tribal factors. And there's a lot of, the word we use for that is syncretism between traditional orthopraxy in both Islam and Christianity, and then the tribal traditions. And there's a lot that looks very different. The movie showed that really well.
Yeah, they did.
And it also showed that there's not a whole heck of a lot of tension. There are certainly religious skirmishes. Back in 2011, we had some issues with that. There's certainly problems. But on the whole, day to day, it's not rated as a really religiously angry place. The only exception to that is when we start talking about sexuality, which is still functionally, culturally illegal in Malawi. And so that's a difficulty for especially people of faith to figure out what to do with there as they start to travel and see other things. So, but I really loved how they talked about funerals and grief and some of the tribal traditions that came into that. That I think a lot of Westerners looked at it would be like, what the heck is that? So.
Yeah, the film was like kind of bookended by two funerals. And the first one was Christian, but then had the tribal elements. And then the second one was Muslim, but then also the tribal elements. And it, like, without telling you that there was this syncretism, they just showed you. And you were like, oh, this is just how life is.
Life works, yep.
How everyone who lives in this village, at least,
experiences the world. Yep.
Experiences the world. Yeah. It was beautifully done in its simplicity, but like, told a very complicated story. Yeah.
Which is, I think, in a very real way, the summary of the story. It was simplistic. Yeah. It did a lot of showing, not telling. And it was really beautifully made. Additionally, little cameo from Jeffrey the Butler from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So anyone
oh yeah, that's right.
wondering like, why do I know that face? Why do I know that face?
And the acting was superb, and the wee boy in it was fantastic. So we could not
highly recommended.
Even just to expose yourself to a side of the world you might not know about, or a life story that you have no way of sympathizing with, you know, build a little empathy and watch it. It was a great 2 hours.
Yeah, and then if you want to help us build some wells and send some kids to school, we've got some links for you beneath the video.
We will have them below. But that is all we have for now. We will next be back with our coverage of The Handmaid's Tale, but not when The Handmaid's Tale airs. We will have a video explaining why, but effectively vacations were planned before Hulu released the launch date for season 3 of Handmaid's Tale. But that's when we will be back, sometime around the end of June, the beginning of July. Everybody enjoy your June. And we will see you for Handmaid's Tale season 3. For now, I'm Dr. Hinson.
I'm Dr. Donnelly.
We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.